Hi, I'm Shannon, and this is Weed Mama. So today I want to talk to you about using cannabis when you have anxiety. Will cannabis trigger your anxiety, and how you can use cannabis to prevent that from happening? So I have generalized anxiety panic disorder, so I have to be really careful when I use cannabis. I have to make sure that I use it in such a way that it won't trigger a panic attack. And over the years, I've gotten really good at managing that and using cannabis in such a way that I feel really good and I get all those wonderful benefits from the cannabis plant without it making me anxious. So I'm going to talk to you about how cannabis works in your body and why it can trigger anxiety. I'm also going to talk to you about certain methods that will be better for you if you have anxiety, and also dose. Okay, let's talk about why cannabis can trigger anxiety in some people. So the cannabis plant is made up of many different properties. We have cannabinoids like THC and CBD. Those are the two most abundant that you're probably familiar with. THC is the one that gets you high, and CBD is the one that you can use to actually reduce anxiety. It does not get you high. There's other properties as well, such as terpenes and flavonoids. And all of these properties working together can affect how cannabis will feel in your body. So it's important to look at not just the THC and CBD when you're looking at cannabis products. You do also want to look at terpenes if they have that information, because certain terpenes will actually have a more calming effect. For example, caryophyllene, which is found in peppercorns. You hear Willie Nelson's little trick of chewing on some peppercorns if you get a little too high, and I've done that and it's absolutely disgusting. Don't recommend it. We don't want to have to go there, okay? We want to use cannabis so that it doesn't have that kind of effect. You don't have to chew on disgusting peppercorns to make yourself feel better. But this is just to give you a little bit of a general idea of how cannabis works in your body. So your body has something called an endocannabinoid system made up of many different receptors that are found all throughout the brain and the body. So the cannabinoids like THC and CBD from the cannabis plant bind themselves to these various different receptors in your body. Your brain is also, has its own brain chemistry, and everyone's works a little bit differently. So THC, once it gets into your body, either will trigger anxiety or it will just calm you down. But how do you know it's you? You have to go in with caution when you're using cannabis and you have an anxiety disorder. Now, if you have something like panic disorder, I would be really cautious about using cannabis. I have a panic disorder, so I do understand how it can be triggered, and it can be triggered over nothing. And sometimes it's just working it up in your head when you're about to use cannabis that you can trigger a panic attack just by your worry about it. So if you're in a really heightened state of anxiety right now, if you're going through a flare-up of panic attacks, I don't really recommend using THC. I recommend just trying CBD and some other products. I'm going to talk to you about other products and dosing later, so watch the end of the video. You might still want to try it, because just because you have an anxiety disorder doesn't mean that it's going to trigger it. It actually might help it. Okay, let's talk about methods and which methods will be better for you when you have anxiety. So there's a lot of different ways you can use cannabis. You can inhale it, you can eat it, or you can use something like a transdermal patch, which you would wear on your ankle or your wrist, which would slow release cannabis. Usually it's THC or CBD over a long period of time, anywhere from 12 to 72 hours. So I'm going to first tell you about the methods that you should avoid and you should not do. First of all, smoking. Do not smoke cannabis. If you have anxiety, highly recommend you avoid this because smoking is very strong. You're lighting it on fire and you're inhaling smoke, and that can trigger anxiety. It's also bad for you. It's high in tar. I don't recommend that you ever smoke cannabis, really. There are better methods. But smoking, definitely, I don't recommend smoking when you have anxiety, especially. The other thing you want to avoid are concentrates. So there are some vape pens that are formulated to be lower dose. And those ones might actually be good for somebody with anxiety, especially if you look at something like a brand like Dosist, which are formulated to be lower dose, and they have a buzzer. So when you inhale, it buzzes when you get an exact 2.5 milligram dose, so it's very controlled. And it might be the easiest, most accessible way for somebody to try cannabis, but concentrates do have a little bit of a different feel, and they can be strong, even in low doses. But like I said, there are some pens you can buy that are low dose, but in general, stay away from concentrates as well. I also don't recommend using edibles, but there are certain kinds of edibles that I do recommend. So the reason why I don't really recommend edibles is because edibles can be very strong. Edibles are processed through your liver, so THC then becomes a far more potent 11-hydroxy-THC, and this is a long-lasting effect that you're going to have. So if you accidentally take too much, and it might not seem like it's a very big dose, but for you it might be a big dose, and you take it, now you're committed for several hours, and you don't have to go through that if you have anxiety. So I'm going to talk to you about which methods are going to be the best for you if you have anxiety. First of all, the one I recommend the most is dry herb vaporizing. So I have several videos on dry herb vaporizing that you can check out to talk about how that works. Dry herb vaporizing allows you to turn up the temperature and down the temperature to release certain cannabinoids and terpenes. This allows you to customize your experience so that you can turn the vaporizer down and then you're not getting as many properties of the plant. So you can really get a much lighter experience. Plus when you're inhaling, especially when you're inhaling dry herb. I don't know why dry herb vaporizers tend to wear off a little faster than smoking cannabis. So it's a good method to use. It's the one I recommend if you have anxiety. The downside is dry herb vaporizers are expensive and you're not going to want to go spend $300 just to try cannabis. So if you can find somebody who has a dry herb vaporizer that you can borrow so that you can get a feel for it and see if it's for you, I recommend that. But if you don't have a dry herb vaporizer, the second method I recommend, fast-acting edibles. Basically anything that is water soluble. So if you're looking at beverages of any kind, tinctures that are alcohol-based tinctures you can put under your tongue and use sublingually? I can never pronounce that word. And then that gets absorbed into your bloodstream and bypasses the liver. Same with fast-acting edibles. So it will work quicker. You're going to get an onset of about 15 minutes or so and a duration of about an hour. Very similar to inhaling cannabis. Now for me, fast-acting edibles tend to take about an hour to fully kick in and wear off at almost 2 hours. Now, I talked to a scientist, a cannabis scientist about this, and she theorized that it was maybe my metabolism is really slower, or that maybe my body's more efficient in processing things through the liver. Everybody's going to be a little different. Fast-acting edibles are a better way to try cannabis if you're new and you have anxiety, simply because of the fact that you're not going to be committed to a long edible that's going to wear off in several hours. Just in case it does trigger anxiety, this method is more likely to wear off faster. Fast-acting edibles you want to look for are beverages, teas, like anything that you drink, like a tea or those mixers. Tea God, Ripple makes some mixers that you can mix in liquid. That's another thing you can use. Some products will tell you that it's fast acting. If you head over to weedmama.ca, any edible that is fast acting will have that listed beside the product so that you know if it's fast acting or not, except for beverages because all of them are fast acting. So I highly recommend using a beverage when you're starting out with cannabis because it will give you a little bit more of that control over it. So fast-acting edibles, especially ones that you can drink like beverages, but there's also edibles that you can choose, the candies. Dry herb vaporizing. Those are the two methods that I recommend if you want to give THC a try and see if it'll make you anxious. Those are the best methods to try. Or you can use, as I said, a vape pen that is very low dose. So let's talk about dosing next. When it comes to cannabis, dosing is the most important thing. This is what will give you a really nice experience or one where you're going to just be white knuckling your way through it. So when you're first starting out with cannabis, you always want to do under, if you're doing an edible, for example, under 5 milligrams. However, when you have anxiety, I would not start with more than 2 to 2.5 milligrams. If you take 2 to 2.5 milligrams of THC and it triggers anxiety, I would just not use THC. It's something that's probably not going to work for you. Or it could be the product you tried wasn't good, or the method you tried didn't work well. So I would try a different method. You also want to be in a calm and relaxed environment. So at home, maybe in the evening when you know you're not going to be disturbed, so you're not anxious and thinking about things. You really want to be relaxed. And I find the evening is the best time, for me anyway, that I feel the most relaxed and I feel the most at ease, and that's when I use cannabis and it doesn't bother my anxiety. But that's you know your lifestyle, maybe in the morning is better for you. That's up to you. But whenever you feel the most comfortable and at ease and you know you're not going to be disturbed, that's when you need to schedule time to try cannabis so you can see how it really makes you feel. Now you can try dryer vaporizing, as I said, because dryer vaporizing, you could really turn it down. And when you turn down the temperature, you can release less properties from the plants. You're less likely to have something trigger your anxiety. So if you're looking for a strain, they like us to say cultivar now. If you're looking for a cultivar, you want to look for something that is under 10% THC and 5% and up of CBD. And that will be a nice low dose for you, and also enough CBD that it will help. Now, for edibles, I also recommend finding a product that is high in CBD. There are several on the market that you can buy that have about 2 milligrams or 2.5 milligrams of THC, and then they have about 10 up to 20 sometimes of CBD. So always look for products that have CBD in them. CBD will help to offset some of the side effects from THC, such as feeling jittery and anxious. And I pretty much recommend CBD in general for everyone if you are taking THC, especially if you're taking it on a daily basis, to always use CBD with it. CBD is a neuroprotectant. It's just really good for you. It actually enhances the good things about THC, and THC enhances the good things about CBD. They work really well together. So I always recommend that you use CBD. And if you do all of that and you still have anxiety, you probably shouldn't use THC and just try different topicals. So if you're using THC topicals, you're not going to have anxiety probably because it doesn't get absorbed into the bloodstream. So we're using something like a bath bomb or creams, unless you're using it on the face where the skin is a little bit thinner. You might get some THC going into the bloodstream through your face, but it's unlikely. So topicals and CBD are a nice way to use cannabis if THC just doesn't work for you. There's a lot of great products that you can try, especially around lubrication for sex, for women. THC can be really helpful with that. And it really shouldn't trigger anxiety because, again, it doesn't get absorbed into your bloodstream. Okay, I hope that is helpful in helping you start or try cannabis when you have an anxiety disorder. And just know that I'm somebody who, like I said, I have an anxiety disorder. I trigger my anxiety all the time using cannabis when I'm not mindful about it. Using cannabis with intention and being mindful in your cannabis use will always prevent you from ever using too much so that you don't trigger anxiety. Okay, so do leave a comment below if you have any questions. I will do my best to answer them. I also head over onto weedmama.ca. I have a lot of learning guides, and I talk a lot about the different methods and things ways that you can use cannabis, especially when you have anxiety, over there.